Hello, and welcome back to the JRB podcast with myself, Ryan Levine, Jeff Jones, and Bohdan Temnyk.
Hello.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about the remote YCS that just happened last weekend, as well as the recently revealed OCG Forbidden and Limited list for January 1st. So I think they're kind of both heavily focused on Tearlaments. So I guess let's first talk about the remote YCS and kind of this was the first event where our new list went into effect, and shockingly, nothing changed. Tearlaments is still
Yeah.
the best deck, and
So,
Flunder
so
got
like
second again.
to quell a lot of what people have been saying, and hopefully, the people that are actually gaining something from this are listening to it. They posted an article remnant to like what they had before. Do you remember what it was like? Oh, Konami writer writes their opinion
Yeah,
on the ban list, right? And like everyone was like up. It was like an uproar from the
in
public.
2016 was the last time that happened,
I,
right?
I think so. Yeah, it was like someone from Konami Europe or something, right?
Yeah.
Or it was like maybe one of the US like intern, right? I don't know. So this one was Michael Kahanim, who doesn't work for Konami, mind you.
Not
I
work
think
for
a lot of
Konami,
people,
yes. And people don't
yes,
understand that.
people don't get that. However, I think he did a very good job in not posting anything that was too opinionated, and basically everything he said was more like public sentiment than anything.
Yes.
And nothing was just like actual R&D related. Like this happened because of this. It
Yeah.
was just all stuff that made a lot of sense. And I think people aren't really taking that one in. It's like I'm more happy that Konami is willing to write something about the ban list, right? But it's not Konami writing about the ban list. Like they're
Yeah,
letting an
they're letting
article writer.
someone else,
Yeah.
post something about it. Yeah, I think we should I would like to reiterate this because a lot of people seem to think that this is Konami giving out reasoning. This is not
Mm,
Konami. This is someone
no.
who, uh, Konami, like borrows for events, and Michael, great guy, awesome
Yeah.
person, but does not work for Konami. So those opinions are not solely from
Hmm.
Konami. He's just someone who, you know, donates his time to
Yeah.
To
But
write,
running
but
yeah, because
again,
he
events.
like
writes a lot of
unlike yeah,
written
he does.
coverage.
He's very good.
Yeah.
He loves the written coverage. Yeah,
Mhm.
they also had him on. They do him commentary sometimes for TCG, and he does a lot of Duel Links commentary as well. He was doing
Oh,
the
I didn't know that.
KC
That's pretty
Grand
cool.
Tournament as well. Yeah, he did both of the COVID related KC Grand Tournaments with Luke Withington,
Oh,
which I
interesting.
thought
I
was
didn't know
really
that.
cool.
That's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah. He's very knowledgeable, and he plays a lot of Duel Links. Very cool.
Yeah, he actually
Yeah.
was
So.
the feature writer for my written feature at Minneapolis. I'm just remembering that now, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like this dude's also like top nationals and gone to worlds. Like he's
yeah.
just he exists, but like he exists from 2000 whatever till now. Like he's an OG,
Yeah.
and it's good to see him stick around. I think he's also a lawyer as well, so
Okay.
for him to keep out.
Okay.
I think
He is a
Anyways, let's move
lawyer.
on.
yeah,
Let's
but
move
yeah,
on from that.
enough
Any,
Michael Kahana
yes.
praise. But yeah, so
Yeah.
as I said before, I think he did a good enough job compared to what
Mhm.
they did in 2016, where they let the writers just like, hey, say something, and like obviously, the writer in 2016 was way more opinionated and more incorrect with a lot of what he was saying, and it made Konami look a lot worse. I think Kahanim did a good enough job where people actually believe that, oh, this is something that like Konami would put out. However, it's not Konami. You can put some stake in it. Like who knows? Maybe the Konami editor had some approval, but I don't think the editor knows what Yu-Gi-Oh is. So there was that. Yeah, onto the event itself. Very standard. Surprisingly, a lot more people than we could have anticipated. I think a lot of people did enter for the participation pricing, which all you had to do was
Was it more
enter,
people? It
and
was only like it was
it
like
was like five something.
I
But like I
I
think that's a lot for a remote.
I was
sure.
one of them. I just entered, and one of the judges messaged me around 3. Was like, "Are you playing? You're not showing up." And I'm like, "Nah, I just wanted the stuff. It was free."
Yeah, pretty much. Well, like they even made a point to announce that on the Konami thing. It's just like you do. It's just like there is no minimum participation requirement for these entry prizing, like the
I
entry
actually got
pricing.
a personalized email from them saying, "Hey Jeff, we saw that you didn't sign
I
up
also
yet,
got that. That's
and
very funny.
was like, hey, would you like to sign up? It's free. You don't have to
Hmm.
do anything." I was like, you know what? All right, sure, whatever. I mean, I gotta pay
For
anything
you
anyway.
especially, right? Because
Yeah, for
you're a
me anyway.
VIP.
Yeah, yeah.
But part
So
of me makes me wonder if they're just like using that method to pad their numbers to justify remote dueling existing. But that's a different story, and it might get me in some hot water if I do bring it up. But yeah, so like looking at the Swiss rounds, I don't think you saw too much. Like they had the written coverage. Nothing seemed to stand out until we get into top 32 as is tradition. You had your rogue strategies, which is like whatever. I think top 32 ended up being, a pretty reasonable amount of tier as to be expected. And then you
Do you know the
obviously have your
breakdown for that?
I'll
Because
I'll
I
pull it up.
don't.
I'll pull it up right now. I'll pull up the breakdown right
Yeah,
now.
I don't know the exact breakdown, but I was gonna just base it off the top four, which was literally just 2 Flunderies versus 2 Tearlaments on, both sides of the bracket. Flunderies versus Flunderies, and then Tearlaments versus Tearlaments.
Continue. I'll find that for you in a second.
Oh, okay, good. No, you're all good. Yeah, so like the runic versions, I think we saw Naturia, which from my experience, that deck doesn't really have a win condition, and I don't think it's good enough to play in a tournament with an actual time limit because you can't close the game. And like I guess like your alt win condition is like the runic cards where you are able to deck your opponent out. On the other end, I saw a lot of buzz behind the new Mystic Mind deck, quote unquote, and it was just like rune stuff with like Messenger of Peace and shit like that, which I think is
Is
probably
that a
like
real thing?
yeah, like they like flood you and
What?
have like Messenger. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
yeah.
had an
So
opponent
you
in
like
Master
so
Duel
you
play Messenger Piece against me. That confused me a little bit. And he was playing a
yeah.
runic
So
deck.
like they just play like protect like Majesty's Fiend like they were doing before. But like obviously with no Mystic Man it becomes a bit more difficult. So like they're just sticking cards like Messenger and then trading with the runic cards and then drawing the cards back.
Okay.
And hopefully you have this like little war back and forth where like you're milling enough banishing them. And
I
if
have
they're
the
playing
breakdown.
Tearlaments and then milling cards as well, then yeah. So like it's like a rogue strategy. I think it's like not incredibly viable. But if you verse Tearlaments opponents who don't respect like back row decks, so like there's some people who aren't siding stuff like Twin, that becomes like a big deal because people are more going towards like Zombie World and Banshee, covering Flunderies because they don't anticipate any other like rogue strat. So like you have to put yourself on drawing the field spell, being able to resolve like a shuffler or something, and like Runic has an MST. I don't know, man. Like it just seems kind of wishful sometimes in that matchup. So, but I think once you know it exists and you know how to play against it, becomes a lot easier.
Yeah,
So
I think it's
sort of
also
stuck
like
into,
a lot of people weren't playing back row removal, and like now that a deck like this is top, they will. But
yeah, definitely.
for the breakdown,
What did you?
yeah, we have 18 Tearlaments, mostly Bestial, but a couple just pure. It's actually pretty evenly split, honestly, between Bestial and not. There's maybe a little bit more leaning Bestial, but there are like 5 or 6 pure. 5 Sprite, again, mostly Bestial. I think actually I don't think any Sprite top without Bestials list that I see. And then 5 Flunderies, 3 Runic, 2 being a pure Runic deck like the one you described, and 1 being a Naturia Runic, and then 1 Exosister.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, it was 2. It was 2 of like the control deck, and then 1 Naturia deck.
Yeah,
which is very
Oh
different.
no, like yeah, because I think they mentioned like 2 people. They only really talked about one of the control versions.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Well, 2
That's,
of them
like,
are just listed as
pretty-
Runic, so maybe I'm
Yeah,
wrong,
yeah,
but
I
2 of
guess
them
so.
just say Runic, and 1 says Naturia Runic, and
yeah.
I've actually seen his deck, and I know he was playing, the
Yeah,
heavy
yeah.
Naturia deck, but yeah.
So
So
I think it's expected, right? Like this breakdown doesn't seem too far off.
we're
what we've
seeing tier
seen
lose
before.
ground, which I guess
Yeah.
makes sense because now it's like it's weird. Like as the format goes on, and then
When
tier
is that related to
keeps
remote
winning.
more than
Oh,
anything?
that's a good point. That is
Because
a good
I
point.
think that was a big deterrent because like you saw Dominic Couch and he was very vocal about it. He's like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to resolve my tier cards on remote duel. It's just gonna be like a headache. So he's stuck with Flunderies.
That's a
It's
good point.
easy, it's concise. Yeah. So like that could have been a factor. Yeah, I don't know. I think it might just be like an arbitrary reason, but
Yeah.
I do agree. I do think you see a lot of people, especially at like the tail end of a format like this, right? There's no event for North America until YCS Vegas or like YCS Mexico, if you consider that to be part of North America. But yeah, so like, what
Okay.
else are you?
Yeah.
No, I you know what I mean.
Anyways.
So yeah, like if you have the tier cards, what are you playing? And there is probably a greater chance that maybe the tier cards get hit with some, people anticipating a Forbidden Limited list. We saw the field spell go down in price significantly. We saw these big shifts in value, right? and with the OCG ban list, which we'll get into more, after, we saw a lot of changes there, and I think people maybe anticipate that a lot of hits will happen. So maybe they're just going for a more budget alternative, not using the tier deck. Maybe like they have the competitive spirit, but again, it's remote. Two, it's uh, close enough to Christmas, and like cards are expensive. Maybe you just play Flunderies instead of playing Tearlaments or something. So I don't think we got an actual like round one post decklist submission breakdown. So it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see what the conversion looked like. Because we've
I
seen
also
some very
think
skewed
enough
conversions
people didn't
before, right?
play, right? Like enough
Yeah,
people like
that's
didn't play that it's whatever. Like
well. If you really look at it, I think this had even after people who dropped like round one, round two. Yeah, I think it still had more, if not more, or the same amount of people as some of the Central and South American YCSs that we had this season in like the 400 range. Because I was still seeing like table two something playing like round three. You know what I mean? Like with people on there, not like no show, no show. So yeah, like I don't know. Like obviously, remote duel to me will always have a check mark because I feel like there's a lot of factors around it where it doesn't feel like real Yu-Gi-Oh. However, I feel like the number's still significant enough where you still have to take the results into consideration. But you sort of have to use better judgment when determining how you interpret these results
yeah.
more than anything.
I think the last thing I kind of want to talk about the remote event is now in the last two events we saw Jesse win Costa Rica with
Hmm.
you know 7 Bishols in the main,
Hmm.
all of the Ishizu cards. Granted, that was technically last format, so he also had 3 orange lights, but whatever. That's the only thing that really changed in his deck. And then we had Christian Urena win the remote event with no Bishols and instead opting for um, the more of like the power spell cards, right? Like
Mm.
so no hand traps other than I guess Havnus and Kelbeck technically are hand traps, and then the one orange light. And I think it's an interesting like the two very interesting ways to go about uh, playing the mirror, right? Where they both have now moved back to 3 Agito, right? Like the
Mm.
two winning lists have moved back to 3 Agito, which we saw that card being cut or fall a little bit out of favor previously because the thought process was, well, if I mill my opponent, then they'll trigger their tier effects, and
Yeah.
then it doesn't really matter. Now we're seeing more people not playing tier element than we were before. So arguably, just milling is better because 30% of the time your opponent isn't playing tier and you just win because you milled them.
Mm.
And then when you have these cards like Bishols or you have Talents or Super Poly, I think you can much more freely mill them because then you can just benefit from them triggering their effects anyway, right? Like if you Agito and you mill
Yeah.
both of us 5, and then your opponent mills like a Murley, you have Talents. Like you don't care if they get a take the kit, or like you get Bistral, just take the
Yeah.
Bistral, make a Beatrice. It's like
Like in concept, it's like you saw some of the list prior with more Bestials sort of playing to the field of like the mirror match is the only matchup I'm meant to worry about.
mhm.
But we've seen a lot of these rogue strategies sort of pull up a little bit where you can still drop a significant amount of games to them just based on how they're building their deck to counter a Shizu tier. And we used what do we used to call them? We used to call them like suicide bomber strategies, right? Like this might flag
Yeah.
something. Oh no. But yeah, like that was the big thing, right? Like they're decks that can never truly win the tournament, but we've seen them win the tournament. We've seen you could argue that like Ray Dye winning with the Exorcist strategy is sort of like a similar concept. But like like you would always just be scared of those sort of decks more in the sense that like you can't truly counter them, and you have to sort of find like in engine, right? I think Christian's list did a good enough job at doing that, anticipating that all these rogue decks are countering tier a lot more than they would before. However, he found that nice mid level where it's just like this is a deck that I would look at and say this will top a tournament, right? Like if you all the stars align and you're not versing a crazy amount of a Shizu tier, but you're anticipating a lot of rogue and Swiss, this will top the tournament. And then when you make top cut, obviously you have to navigate, more mirror matches, still enough rogue and stuff like that, but like it's less rounds, I guess, than you would play in like a 10 or 11 round, Swiss event. when you get into top cut, just playing like your top 32, you just have to play like 1, 2, or 3 tiers maybe. If you verse all 4, then like you can still win just by being the better player in the mirror match enough of the time. I don't think Bestials is the make or break. So
So
I think it's just like
sorry,
concept people don't really get into.
I'm looking at his matchups. He played in his 5 rounds of Top Cut. He played 2 Flunder, a Sprite, and 2 Tier.
Yeah, so that's well, like, did he post his Swiss breakdown as well?
I no, I don't think so. I
Okay.
just checked his Top
Yeah.
Cut breakdown just from the pairings.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. No, that's good. That was nice and quick. Good stuff, Ryan. But yeah, so like I think that's something to like consider. Same thing as like modern Yu-Gi-Oh in general, right? Where a lot of the meta calls that you make are dictated by what you play against in an event. Like you could verse like the wrong half of the field and just get absolutely destroyed. You know, like if you played 11 rounds of Flunderies matchups and you're playing like tier with Bestials in it, I think you will lose game one more often than not. You know, but like on the other hand, you could just verse 11 rounds of Shizu tier. So I don't know.
So
It's just finding that level of balance that becomes really difficult in a format like this.
that's an issue that I think comes up more in much wider formats.
Mm.
Like I really like formats like I still think my actual favorite format recently was honestly the Darkwing Blast meta, because I felt like Sprite and Tier were both pretty equal in power level, or at least very, very close, right? Now, I think if you want to beat Tier as a Sprite deck, you have to play like the higher variants, like cheese cards, kind of. And that's less fun, I think. And it's less interesting, like, gameplay wise, when you look at your deck and you're like, well, if I'm going to beat them, I have to do like stupid things like Gamma Burst or the new like Mosquito card. It's like Sprite can't win an honest game anymore, right?
Yeah, like if you were to if like in the Darkwing Blast format, if I were to go up to someone and say, "Oh, what's your record?" They're like, "Oh, X1." Like, "Oh, what'd you lose? You lost to Sprite." I'd be like, "Okay, that's fine." But if like right now, if someone told me they lost to Sprite with full power tier like this, I would sigh at them like, "All right, we're okay."
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you know what's happening like when someone says they lost to Sprite and
Yeah.
they're playing a Shizu. Yeah, like it's just so swingy, and I feel like it's literally just there to like cheese out a victory, which is fine. Like it's just how Yu-Gi-Oh is meant to play out
Yeah.
a lot of the time. Like especially with like the current power creep. Like, I'm not gonna fault someone for playing a deck like that, you know, because like a Shizu tier is quite difficult. And that's not to slight my, the people playing like Sprite. Like I have friends, I told them like, hey, you should play these decks. You will have a lot more fun than sitting there crunching the numbers and racking your brain and remembering like all these micro interactions.
The thing is, like, the Sprite cards are still very strong. It's just that the Ishizu cards are ridiculous, right?
Yes.
Like it's not like Sprite's terrible and has to get lucky. It's just like Sprite is like arguably the second strongest deck we've ever seen printed.
Yeah.
Unlucky, the strongest deck we've ever seen printed came out right next to it.
Well, it's more. I think everything has to find like these weird alt win cons that just don't really lead to conducive gameplay. And by design, I don't think it's necessarily like the Sprite player's problem. Like it's more the Ishizu tier deck being so ignorant that you have to counter it with additional levels of ignorance.
Oh
right?
no, I
So,
agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I guess more so I was saying like as far as the building your deck to beat specific decks, I think what you're talking about is definitely still relevant. Like it's definitely possible, mainly because decks like Ishizu tier and decks like Flunder are countered by the complete opposite cards, that it can be frustrating to build a deck in a format like this. And I guess like I still think it's more frustrating when there are like 10 decks and there's just nothing you can do from a deck building perspective to really have like an edge game one. I still think like the NAWCQ format of this year was a field that was so open. I'm pretty sure in the 11 rounds I played like 7 different decks, and it was just like I don't know what. I just gave up and just played a Floodgate Eldritch deck like that, just because I decided, well, if I can't figure out what to side or man in any of these in this event, surely my opponents won't be able to either, and they didn't, and just they couldn't beat my Floodgate deck. It's just like when it's so wide, it's just nearly impossible to be able to hit everything effectively, and then your losses will be more dictated by your matchups and less by like how you actually play, which I think can be frustrating. And now I think like I would still say I don't know how I feel about the development of like the runic deck, or like not the development of it, but I don't know how I feel about how that deck topped this event, because I feel like, does that mean that you have to adjust, like surely you don't adjust your main deck, but maybe you adjust your side deck?
I don't think you're meant to adjust your main deck,
Uh,
because I think your game one is still like winnable by technical play. Like the field spell is so powerful into decks like that, which makes it like a little bit more reasonable. Obviously, there's like a bit of like a time, sorry, like a clock behind like you having the field spell and using it efficiently to like trade cards and get the value off it. Like obviously, it'll trade like a Hugin or something more often than not when you're trying to pop Fountain, and like they could just have like tip to get the MST and like nothing matters,
I
right?
wonder if there's consideration to play a 1400 attack rank 4 so you can just Zeus them. Like, is that real? To get under Messenger of Peace? Like,
That's very funny.
is that real?
Uh,
I'm gonna just do a quick sweep of rank 4 1400, but you keep going.
yeah, yeah. I don't think I've considered it. I feel like I would probably just try and pop it. Like I think
Yeah, field
that's a deck
spell pop.
that would try and win the game one relatively quickly. With cards like Majesty's Fiend, like you know what I mean. If you get that far, I think there's a lot more happening where like you could probably do other stuff, right? Like you could just Exciton Knight your opponent instead of
Oh, that's much more reasonable. You
yeah
definitely just play Exoton
yeah
instead of what I said, for sure.
that's
Yeah,
okay.
you're right. I mean, I guess Ptolemaeus technically, if you slotted that in, can just attack actually. But you probably aren't playing
Yeah.
that. You're probably playing Dweller, as we talked
You
about
also
last week.
well, also Dugaris, which is actually
Oh,
insane.
Dagaris is also. You're right. Yeah, it's
Zero, yeah.
12. It's 1200.
Is it 12?
Yeah, it's
What
1200.
am I thinking of that has 0?
You're thinking of Rhapsody,
Anyway,
probably.
you know what? That makes sense. Actually, they're all very similar to me. If you look at Rhapsody and Dagaris, you can't fault me. But to touch on the topic of Ryan saying wider formats, being a little bit more difficult with stuff like that, I think the widest format that I'm looking at currently, which happened like 4 or 5-ish days ago, is the OCG, what they like to call it, the limit regulations for January 1st.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I guess that's
let's
a good
let's
transition
get that
point.
up.
Yeah. I'm just gonna run
Yeah.
through the list. Just
So just a clarification though, in OCG, right, similar to where we're at now, they have hit tier so significantly time after time, and by significantly I mean it arguably done nothing. And tier has just been the top deck since God knows when.
since Ishizu came out, because Sprite was a
Yeah.
little bit ahead of it, and then Ishizu came out, and then Tyr has just run away with it since then, no
Well,
matter what
I
hits
think
they've done.
post Power of the Elements, and I think there was like maybe no, because the Shizu came out before Dabble in OCG.
Yes.
So I think maybe post Power of the Elements format in OCG, you did see this like power struggle initially, because I think people really didn't understand how tier was meant to function in Japan. And then obviously as more and more powerful cards came out and there was like more synergy behind like the Ishizu stuff, tier was just taking the commanding lead. But yeah, so like they would just hit it incrementally, and more tier stuff would come out. We have Tearlaments Kashtira stuff, and it's just like, oh well, tier's the best deck. And finally, Konami decided to salt the earth. And here we are now.
Literally salt the earth. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
So
going into
instead of
effect,
going through all of them and
just
then going
do
back,
the
I think we should
relevant
do them one
ones.
at a time.
Yeah, I'm down. I'm down.
Yeah, so we'll just go through them one at a time and talk about them.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, that's fair. So Kit Kalos. I guess let's group all of the Tearlaments hits in a
Yeah,
row.
yeah.
So Kit Kalos banned 0 copies. Sheeran limited and Rhino Heart limited.
They already had Havness
Huge,
too.
and they
No,
already
there's
had Havness to
There's
2.
another one.
There's another one.
Yeah, it's the no, the Prime Planet is the Kashira one.
That's
Never
the
mind. Okay,
Kashira
yeah.
one. But they had Planet at 1 in Japan as well.
But yeah,
Yes.
Planet was already at 1.
So basically they put every tier card to
Other than
1
Merly.
except Merly, which is incredibly funny, which is crazy, because the TCG sentiment, from what a lot of us have said, and a lot of people have agreed, is just, what if you just ban Merly? Or you
Yeah.
putting Merly to 1. That
And
would shift
instead-
quite a lot, right?
Instead,
It
they did the
removes Alea.
opposite and hit
Yes.
every other card.
Literally insane that they like TCG isn't playing, like OCG has Maxi and they decide to put Rhino Heart to 1. TCG doesn't have Maxi. We don't play 3 Rhino Heart. You know, like that's
Yeah.
arguably one of the more like brickier sort of tier cards with like less application. Like normal summon Merly to try and hit a shuffler is just so huge, and it still baffles me. But I guess like when you hit every other like tier card, Merly just doesn't matter, right? Like who gives a shit?
Yeah.
So one other card I want to group into these, which is hilarious,
Oh,
is the
goods.
semi-limited, yeah,
Yeah.
semi-limitation of Foolish Burial Goods, which saw no other play outside of the tier deck, and that's because they limited their field spell to 1. And it's almost
Hmm.
just like they looked at what is the tier limit deck playing? Oh, this card's in it, so let's just hit it. They're, like not even like realizing that it is just completely inconsequential. It was never going to see play outside of the deck anyway.
Oh,
Um,
once we get to the semi-limited lists, you'll
Yeah.
hear a lot of us
It's
yelling because I don't think a lot of these cards need to be at 2. It makes 0 sense, but
yeah.
no,
we know
yeah,
Japan loves putting cards to
They
2.
do love putting cards to
Japan
two.
loves it. It's like the litmus test. It's like the teaser. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, we'll like do this and see what happens. It's like, oh, they check the pregnancy test and there's a baby and put it to 3. Like it's just ridiculous to think about. Or like
Okay.
nothing happens and it sits at 2 for the next like 17 years because they forgot it
Yeah.
existed.
Itali's still at 2 in Japan. It's been at 2 in Japan for like 7 years or something.
Like the card
Like
is
some
just
ridiculous,
unplayable.
like some just ridiculous amount of time.
Oh well.
so this is something that we talked about briefly before the podcast started, but I feel fairly confident in saying that if all you did, even if all the other tier cards were at 3, was ban Kitkalos, I
Hmm.
think the deck ceases to function.
Yeah.
I
Well,
I
like what
don't
what else are you doing? Japan doesn't have Garura currently. Maybe
Oh,
they're
that's a
if
anticipating
huge.
that.
Oh, I didn't even
yes.
think about
Maybe
that.
maybe
They don't
they're
have.
just like,
Oh
oh,
man.
Garura comes out and this deck is actually viable in some form. Like maybe
Well,
they're just leading
so
towards something
the
like that
thing
as
is, when you
well.
say like viable in some form, I don't even think that's true. Because what are you doing on your turn? Well, you always have to use Kit to facilitate your
Oh,
plays to grab
no,
an
no, no,
extender
Jeff,
and mill
I
5
agree.
more.
I agree. I'm saying Japan probably looked at all of the tier cards and looked at Kit. The logical person would be like, yes, you ban Kit. This makes a world of sense because all the other tier cards aren't, doing as much. Everything else is like less fluid, and you have to make a bunch of like the more not expensive fusions early, but like the more inefficient fusions early. So like a lot of your free cards don't necessarily end up being free. Um, so Japan maybe said, "Oh, well, we have our extra pack or world premiere pack, whatever they like to call it now, coming out for 2023. We'll have Garura coming out." It's like, okay, that could be the kit replacement.
I don't think
So
that comes
like,
out for them for like
what?
all for like
Yeah, that's like in the
9 months.
summer. Yeah.
Oh, well, still. But like like maybe that's what they're just like looking. They're looking at all the tickets. They're like, oh, like let's just like
I think that
quell
they
the
just look
problem
and they
entirely.
say we don't want people to play this deck
Yeah.
anymore, and they just
Yeah.
I don't think that they even have a sense enough to think all we have to do is ban Kit and that's it. They just want to make sure that no
Mhm.
one even tries.
Which in their defense, I will say, if they truly want Tearlaments to just fall off the face of the earth,
This is the way to do
this is
it.
the way to do it. I'm
Yeah.
like, I am a-okay with them deciding we want this deck gone and just burning it to the ground. Like I'm okay with
Yeah.
that. I think we saw a similar thing happen in the TCG with Necros, where we saw Shurrit get banned and Brio go to 1 and Unicorn go to 1 in the same list. And it's like,
Yeah. And the deck was
did you really
unplayable.
need to do all of that? Like probably
Yeah.
not, but yeah.
That leads me to my next sentiment,
Uh-huh.
where if when it comes to we think that probably January, when we get another list, would you rather see something like this where they just make it was you can't play this anymore, or do you think that i- if someone at Konami is listening to this, where do you think it should fall? Hit all these things or just ban Kit Close? Because I'm under the just ban Kit Close team.
Well, now that I know they're not opposed to doing it, given like the whole bureaucratic red tape associated with Konami USA versus Konami Japan, etc. I wouldn't be opposed to just banning Kikkalos. I don't
Like
think
now
the
that you've seen
TCG hits
Japan
like
just ban
this.
it, so like
Yeah,
you're just
I
yeah.
like,
did not
sure.
think they would ban Kid Close. I
I
thought it
Yeah,
would just be
neither
didn't.
did
like
I. Nah,
limit
I thought
limit
it'd just be
limit
everything to
each of the
one.
main deck monsters to one. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, me too.
I think for TCG, even if you ban Kikkalos, and then with the additional support coming out, I think there's still some viability in like the Tearlaments splash builds. Whereas like you can just use the tier cards as like a residual sort of engine where you just get to like generate cool cards. Like maybe you can play some tier stuff in like your Dark World strategy or something dumb. Like you know what I mean? Like I think if they do anything to
Are you
completely
saying
eliminate the
that
deck.
as a bad thing or saying that
No, no,
as a
I think it's like I think it's fine to have like the other tier cards exist. It
right?
wouldn't surprise me if they decided to put a bunch of them to one, in which case, like, all right, like you just have another deck that just splashes tier, but they get to play with
Okay.
Kick Kalos, which is the best one.
The more I think about it, I think if you take the deck as it is in the TCG, which is currently has no hits to the Tearlament engine whatsoever, if you
Mhm.
just ban Kit Kalos and have no other changes, I don't think like a pure Tearlament deck is great, but I think like a tier sprite deck is just like very very reasonable. Like you're just making Garura
Yeah,
as you mentioned,
um,
and then you Ishizu mill both players, and you go into dark, and maybe you make Mud Dragon, and you can Mud Dragon any. Mud Dragon can turn into any attribute you want. You can take anything from their graveyard, make a Charmer. You can go into Elf and Sprint, and then you can just do that. And I think like that's
Well, to what
still
end at
very
that point?
efficient. I mean, I think you're still
no,
probably setting up like
no, I
Kaleido
get what
Heart
I get what
and
Jeff's saying.
everything
I get
else.
what no, I get what you're saying.
There's no
I think
Rukalos, I guess. That's
Yeah,
definitely
I think as long as that's the other funny one, right? Because like just
you can make
invalidate
King of the Swamp,
Rukalas.
but
Yeah,
whatever.
pretty much. Um, so like I think if you're banning Kit, you see a lot of I think you see Merly lose a lot of value in terms of playability, and the only cards that seem like they would actually have some place in some of these decks would be like stuff like Shiren, and obviously the Field Spell, right? Because like just because of like the power level of the Field Spell, and Shiren is just like a free card, most of the time, so it's functioning quite well.
So if Kid is
Um,
banned, can Rhino Heart just on its own make anything? I don't think so. It
no,
cannot, right?
it it cannot.
No.
That's
No.
crazy. I didn't think about that. Wow, because Rhino
No.
Heart's a water, so you can't make Garura with it. So
Hmm.
just plan it for Rhino Heart, send a tier on its own, doesn't
Does
do anything.
nothing.
Doesn't
Yeah,
do
Yeah.
yeah.
anything, yeah. I don't think there's any fusion
So like
monster in the
I
whole game
think
you can make.
I think it depends on like what perspective TCG wants to see the metagame like shift in. It's like, do you want to see more of these like graveyard based strategies, or do you want like something a little bit more conducive to gameplay? Like I, I think adding getting rid of Kit and still having like a lot of the cards that we have now won't really like aid the problem. Like if you still have obviously like there's other factors that have to be at play where it's like you have to hit the Ishizu stuff. I think you still have to preemptively maybe hit some of the sprite stuff as well. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they just decide to do something like, oh, we'll put Nimble Beaver to like one. Something
That would be
ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like
crazy. That
something
would make the sprite
ridiculous
deck
like
really
that.
bad, actually.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
they if
Like
they
So
put
just
Beaver
something
to
like
one,
that.
sprite would be
I
terrible.
I
Yeah.
imagine they would take a similar route to what Japan did, and they limited the one sprites to one.
They limited
The
Jet,
Yeah.
I think.
Jet, yes, yeah.
Do you
'Cause
think
it's not a
there's a
secret rare,
world?
so it's pretty
I'm
easy to
actually gonna
hit.
check. Is that
Yeah.
the only hit that Japan had to sprite?
That is the only hit they have for sprite.
That's crazy. And
Yeah,
like Swap
outside of
Frog and
like
Ronin Toad.
banning
And Swap
Toad,
Frog,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh no, they banned Toad in OCG, right?
And they banned Toad, yeah. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
Toad,
yeah,
not
yeah,
Ronin
yeah.
Toad.
Yeah, to like
Oh no,
well,
Starter's
spoilers.
also at one in Starter's also at one in Japan.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking at it now.
It's very
Starter's
funny.
at one and Jet's at one.
Ban list
Ew, that
OCG.
deck sucks.
So
Ew.
it's more like
Literally ew.
we've seen all of like the other hits happen, right? So we saw the last ban list that happened. And do we think Konami has like well not like the forethought, but like the like them intuitive, like this sort of like their eyes are on the metagame and they know that if they ban Kit, there's just a whole wealth of other like very powerful decks just waiting, right? But like some of them are actually just like equally as powerful as Tier, but like they just miss that one little gap. Like the Ishizu stuff just tipped everything over the top. You still have all these like really ignorant meta viable decks, some of them that are like kind of oppressive and limiting for good gameplay. Do you think they have the foresight to hit those cards preemptively? Like, do
Yes.
you think if
Yes.
a list comes out in January, do you think there is a world where they decide to limit Fenrir? Just being like,
No,
hey, like we
I don't
think
think they're
no,
gonna
these cards
hit
are still
no.
any
good.
I
Kashiras. I
yeah,
don't think they
Okay,
no.
hit those.
okay. But you think there's a
I
possibility that
imagine that
Sprite hits?
Yes, very much
yeah,
so.
I
Okay.
definitely think that like Jet or Starter could end up going to one. If
I
yeah,
I personally think, and I wouldn't even hate this. So what I like about Yu-Gi-Oh, generally speaking, is just I like playing new cards. I hate when the same deck
same.
is good for too long. It's very, very rare that I like a
Mm.
deck enough that I just like my favorite deck in the world, I'll get bored of it eventually anyway.
Yeah,
Right.
nope,
So
same. Yeah.
I just love when cards rotate out, which is if that's how I feel, I should probably play any card game other than Yu-Gi-Oh where the cards actually rotate
Yeah.
out, on like a very consistent schedule, but I digress. So like
This is incredible.
I personally would prefer if the hits of this list were Tier, Sprite, and Flunder. Flunder, I am so tired of that deck. Oh my god.
Well,
I
let's move
am
on to the next
so
card then,
tired of
because
that deck.
the next card that's forbidden is Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds, and
Yeah,
I
good.
I think I think that is very acceptable, and
Yeah.
I think that will end up being the only hit to that deck
I think it's the only one you
on the next
need.
forbidden list.
I think it's the
Fine.
only one you need.
Yes.
It's crazy. I having been talking to Dom, like having talking to Couch a lot, and he loves his Flunder deck. I want to shut the fuck up about it. Just so like God bless him. Um, but like I've been watching my friends test Flunder because they don't want to play the Ishizu stuff. And at first we're like, oh yeah, Barry's like kind of just like not. It's like it's good, but it's not that good. Like the games that I'm losing aren't necessarily to Barrier. There's like other factors at play. There's like the sort of ignorant level to it of like the other floodgates, Harpy's Featherstorm, stuff like that. I feel like Barrier is like the card I can deal with a lot easier. But there's some situations where it's so oppressive where like you're only limited to your single normal summon. And it's like, you have map and you have like the continuous tribute thing, and you're just gonna tribute my guy, and you have barrier, and now I can't summon anymore. It's like that's where I think barrier just becomes really, really gross. Like it's just a card that shouldn't exist, regardless of like if you sit there and think, oh yeah, if my opponent summons barrier turn one, there's so many instances where that's incorrect, right? That's like the crazy part to me. It's like I think this card is just like it's I don't want to say like I don't want to say an idiot card. Like it's just a very silly card in both ways. If you play it properly, I think it's when it gets the most value, and it's just ridiculous and scary. And then when you play it ignorantly, you have to put your opponent on drawing the out to it, or just like knowing how to navigate all the Flunderies cards. So like I'm very glad this card is just banned. It's just like that one level of polarizing, which is funny because it's just like the most generic card from like 2000 and fucking six. Like
Yeah. Well,
yeah, it
I
just
just
doesn't
think
really do anything.
so like Flunder, like the Flunder cards aren't weak. Like if Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds is banned, Flunder isn't unplayable.
No,
It's
I
absolutely
just
think
not.
that deck is still very play.
it's
Yeah,
just a
like that's
deck. It's just a
crazy.
deck that then now if Barrier Statue is banned, Flunder is a deck that is all interaction based, and that is so much more interesting. And you will still lose to them sometimes, and that's fine. A deck like I guess when I say that I hate playing against Flunder, not it actually the Flunder cards I actually think are somewhat interesting. It's every stupid
Mhm.
card they play around them. It's Barrier
Yes.
Statue, it's Shifter,
Dimensional Shifter.
it's Featherstorm. It's all those cards are just
Yeah.
like they just play them and I go, sure. Like I guess it didn't matter what deck you were playing. Like you flip Featherstorm, I look at my whole hand, I can't play any cards, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
Featherstorm
that
is
could have just
another
been
card where I
The
wished I'd hope that like maybe I would hope that if someone's listening out there and that card goes to one, because
mhm,
even
yes,
putting it to two, you could have things like
trap
trap
trick.
tricks.
Just
yeah.
So
don't hit the actual Flunder engine. Just hit like I think
No,
it
no,
was
I don't
insane
think
that they
there's a
hit like
need to.
they hit like map in Japan. I'm like that is so
Mm.
irrelevant. Like
So
just hit
it's
statue.
it's funny to note you bring up like shifter and stuff like that. I feel like a lot of the time when we look at like a format like this, where obviously tier is like tier zero, right? And then we look at every other card that sort of counters it, and we see people's like, oh yeah, you just have to have shift, you have to have shift. It's like, well, we didn't look at like anything as like, oh, Flunderies is the best deck. It's like, what's the best shifter deck more than anything going into this
Yeah.
format? And it's like, yeah, it's Flunderies. Like, what's the best ignorant deck? Oh, it's Flunderies. Like every other deck sort of just like doesn't mesh too well with a card like shifter, but oh, Flunderies already played it. Like
No, their deck
it's
plays with
fine.
just one card really, so.
Yeah, pretty much. So another funny thing that I want to bring up with this barrier statue thing, right? Do you think they decided to ban it now because they decided to limit Kashtira Unicorn? Because that is something that does
That is
no, like
funny.
this is a legitimate thing
No,
in
I agree.
Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they set up like field spell barrier whatever, um, obviously like being limited by your normal summon is like really annoying. But Unicorn is a wind, and it special summons itself for free into a barrier statue.
And
And I
searchable
think that's like
by
very
planet. So there are
yeah,
seven.
yeah.
There are 7 ways to get it. Yeah.
I think that's like really relevant. And it might be something that we have to consider in terms of like what they might do. Like maybe that's something Konami was thinking about. Maybe it's just something they didn't consider entirely. But it is interesting to see Unicorn go to 1 and the barrier statue finally getting banned.
Yeah.
So like I don't, I'm not sure if they're hand in hand.
Well, I think it has to do with more of what we talked about one time was they were using the level 7s to bring out barrier statue from deck recently.
Yeah, that's true
Remember?
too.
Well, not like that one sort of fell off.
Yeah, but
It
still,
doesn't, it
but
doesn't
it's
matter.
there. But it's
they
there.
saw the,
I know. Like that one's also an issue. Yeah,
I
It's
think that
just-
100% is what they saw. I don't think they would go that
Yeah,
far. And say,
well,
oh, we're
that's
limiting
fair enough.
Unicorn to 1. That's a barrier
Yeah.
statue out.
Well-
I think they saw, oh crap, another deck that's
a
not.
third deck. A
Yeah.
third deck is summoning this specific barrier statue. Maybe it's time we get rid of it. Yeah, like we've had 3 now. This is a little getting a little ridiculous.
I was gonna talk about stuff like Book of Eclipse and all the other outs they play, but you know it's whatever. Like it's the same thing. You have to draw those cards, right? Like who gives a shit? Yeah, sure. I agree. You have to draw all of these cards. Nothing matters. This card shouldn't exist. I can't fight that.
I don't think the argument of there's an out to bury. So what I also hate about like, so it's the combination of all of these cards is like you look at a card like Barrier Statue and you're like, okay, well you just like, well, you know, everyone's already playing these other cards that out monsters. It's like, oh, well, just droplet it. It's like, well, you can't droplet it if they have Shifter. And it's just another layer of just like, well, okay, then I guess I have to have Dark Ruler. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to Dark Ruler you. Oh, you chain Featherstorm. Okay, I pass my turn anyway. It's just, you know what I mean? It's just like, if Flunder draws
like
perfect, nothing can beat it. But if they don't draw perfect, they're not good. And it's just a very frustrating deck to play against.
Even without drawing the non-engine cards, I think like Flunder Engine on its own utilizes Barrier Statue so efficiently, whether
absolutely.
it's on the field or in hand or not. Yeah,
I agree.
Well,
I think it does quite a lot.
Something else about Japan specifically, which is not relevant here, but regarding them, is that we talked about having these non-engine cards to out their barrier statue, and we saw that in Japan, a lot of people are using Book of Eclipse. And I mentioned to Bohdan like a couple weeks ago. I was like, do you know why they use Book of Eclipse and not something like Regeki or Dark Ruler more often? And he's like, no. I'm like, it's because they have 3 of the trap that looks at your opponent's hand for obtain 2,000 life points.
Oh, a pointer?
They have 3 a pointer. So if you get a pointered and your draw phase, you can chain Book of Eclipse, but you can't chain Regeki or Dark Ruler.
Yeah.
So which is also like a reason why you would have to use those cards, and it's just another really dumb card. I think a pointer is a really dumb card too. So
yeah,
I'm glad TCG decided to put it to 1.
I wish they would have just banned it. I don't know why they put it to 1, but still, I'd rather it be at 1 than any other number. I guess like I'd rather them have 1 than 6. I'd preferably they'd have 0, but yes, I understand.
So let's move on to the limited, the very first card, which is probably pretty significant.
Very relevant.
I think. Yeah.
Ancient Fairy Dragon. It did receive an errata. So the errata is hard once per turn for both effects, and it can only search a field spell of a different name from the one it destroys. I personally think this is like, okay, I guess before I get too far into it, how do you guys feel in general about erratas? I think for the most part, they're not handled that well, but I think this is handled extremely well. I would say this is handled on par with like Brionic. I think the errata to Brionic absolutely kept the spirit of the card you can still use Brionic functionally identically to how you did back then, like 90% of the time. Just the 10% degenerate loops you can't do anymore. And I think that is a perfect way to errata a card like Brionic and make it have its intended function. Just they didn't think about how they worded it when they printed it. And this,
So
I feel, is
just
the
to
same
clarify
way.
though, let's go
Mhm.
over the ancient fairy dragon errata real quick. So same as it was before. You have to add a field
Different
spell with a
name.
different name for its
Yes.
second effect.
Mhm.
And they are both hard once per turn.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
We
really
we
about
we,
it.
That
we
is
already went
that is
over
what
it.
I said.
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah.
That is
My
what I
bad.
said verbatim.
I'm so bad.
Anyways,
Okay,
so
cool.
so
But
basically
just clarify
how
for my benefit.
yeah, so how I feel about this in general is like now you can't do dumb things like, again, chicken game is banned here, but in OCG you can't like pop chicken game for chicken game or anything stupid like that. But now you can use it for like Ravine Destrudo stuff. You can use
Yeah, and then
it
get your
just
Kashtira engine
yeah.
online, or
Yeah.
your not Kashtira, sorry, like yeah, to relevant, but relevant
You
now.
can use it in like a
Um,
sort of off meta deck to punish your opponent's field spells, which is interesting. As long
yeah,
as it's not the same name as the one that you're using. So like in a mirror, it's not great. Which I don't necessarily like that. I kind of like I don't like how that application of it is gone, that it's not usable really in a mirror map. I mean, it is sort of like
mm.
because a lot of decks play two field spells, two different ones in Japan, because there are so many different broken field spells that I'm sure you can just tech one in
Mhm.
that you want. So it's probably
Sort of on
Those
fine.
that set
those
rotation level, like if you opt to utilize something like that in your strat, it's probably
Mhm.
just gonna be something you're doing you're probably gonna be playing set rotation
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. So regarding Ryan's first question about how we feel about erratas,
Mhm.
I am all for them. I know there are a lot of people who are like vehemently against them.
Mm.
But I am all for them. I don't mind them at all. But I do agree that a lot of them are handled really poorly. Like the one that I will always go back to that I think was so stupid, and it still makes me angry to this day, was how they invented Go-Yo Guardian when the card wasn't even good.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
well, yeah, that was weird because it was already unlimited here, and then it was still
Yes.
banned in Japan, and it like was barely played, and then they unbanned it in Japan by rotting it. That was a very bizarre case. Yes,
Yeah,
that one
I don't know
definitely
why
is
that
weird. That
happened.
one is really bizarre.
Um,
Yeah.
Unironically, I think the firewall errata is actually kind of decent as well. I think they did a really poor job at the initial erratas, right? Like they did a very good job of making a lot of cards unplayable that weren't playable because of power creep anyway, right? Like if we look at the stuff like Serpent, I guess Exchange of the Spirits is a weird one. Like that card just probably shouldn't exist.
Yeah, Exchange the Spirit. We made that one
um,
better
what was
retroactively.
another one? What was another one from like that premium gold that we got a bunch of
Uh,
erratas for?
um,
I get
Crush Card,
was it Crush
oh
Card was
no,
actually
yeah.
a pretty decent
Imperial Order.
one.
Imperial
Oh
Order, yeah,
yeah,
another
that
card
That
from
one
one.
banned
got banned
again. Yeah.
again. Yes, that one got banned a
And then
second
I guess
time.
they did like they did Temple of the Kings, right? They eroded that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, what else have they read? Oh, like Grand Soil. That card was like at once per turn
Yeah.
Yeah,
originally,
now
and
it's just
now
once
it
per turn.
is.
I think that's a
Pretty
finer. That's a
funny.
perfectly fine errata.
Yeah.
Those ones are okay.
Uh,
Yeah. And
the
then
only
what's like the more
Sangin
relevant
got an
one?
errata and is still pretty good now.
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
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 yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, like Singing and Witch, right? They both got
Yes.
the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And then like
but I,
obviously you have like the neutering of like the Chaos Emperor and stuff like that, where it's just like, yes, we can't have this card exist. Chaos Emperor's hard once per turn. It's like, oh, you just need one turn. Literally rips every card. So like you had to make it as shitty as it is now.
Yeah.
Um, and
but
I'm
yeah,
really trying to think. What was
I
my
will.
point?
When it comes to like Ancient Fairy Dragon, one thing I want to point out is something that I think it would have been interesting, maybe not so much anymore, is how first of all this card is a level 7. And one thing we saw with the Tearlaments deck was how it also used Kashtira, and some of them use multiple different field spells.
Hmm.
One to search the Kashtira cards and one to search the Tearlament cards. So I think being able to like destroy one of them and search the other would be like pretty good. And
Hmm.
I think coming forward, if we get this card back like relatively soon, I don't know when, I think there could be some like cool little
Oh,
hybrid deck with all of the Prime
I'm
Planet
putting
cards.
a Destrudo in my Kashira tier deck for
Right, yeah.
sure if this card comes back. 100,000%.
Yes,
Like not
absolutely.
even
Yeah, so
close.
that's why I bring it up. So I
Yeah.
think between that, and I think also between all the other planet cards, that you might see this card played pretty heavily, because Japan is getting another, um, like Prime Planet Visa Star Frost
Hmm.
deck. So,
I would
uh,
I would hit the tank with a card like Destrudo, obviously because we do have the Bestials. So like again, we don't know if this is why they do certain things. Like who knows? They're just like, hey, like Destrudo is not that powerful now. You can
and I
have
mentioned that it was also like
7
level 7,
Bestials.
so it also you can like
Yeah.
overlay it into one of your rank 7s for
Yeah, yeah.
in the Kashtira deck. But and I think speaking about the Kashtira deck, they limited 3 Kashtira cards to 1, which are
Mm.
Fenrir, Unicorn, and the Prime Planet Paraisos.
Which we don't even
Um,
have yet. But
which we don't
basically,
have that.
it's
Yeah.
just the Tear Element field spell, but for Kashtira. Just you activate it, you get a Kashtira, and then when the deck fulfills what it wants to do, it also pops a card, just like the
Yeah,
Tear field spell. And I think they might gain attack, maybe they don't. I don't remember.
they gain 100 attack for every different attribute
Mm.
on the field.
Nice. Sure.
I think Fenrir was the makings of a card that had to be limited, right?
Absolutely.
Like
I
it was just
I
anticipated, but I didn't expect the other ones. Like I
I
think that
did
was
not
just like
expect these
more
other ones,
collateral. Yeah.
either. I was very surprised when I opened up
Yeah.
Facebook and saw that all these cards were hits, and the only thing that I could think of is that they really just did not want people like, it's one of those things like, "Alright, no one can play Tearlaments anymore." More people playing also besides that. They were playing the Kashtira deck. Well,
Yeah.
then Kashtira probably just becomes the undisputed best deck, so what do? And Japan usually either severely does things or completely goes overboard. And
Yeah.
I think that they thought, oh, we're going overboard with Tier Limit. We might as well go overboard with this. I So I mean, I
These
think
are the Prime
their new
Planet is
boss.
from the most recent set in Japan. Like
Yes.
it's the current set that card is limited. That's crazy to me.
Um, and I think that also that their boss monster, Arise Heart, is very
That card is
oppressive.
so broken. That card is
Yes.
so broken.
And I think that if I was working on the game from their perspective, I would look at this and think, well, this card is pretty impressive, and anything that comes out afterwards has to be able to compete with this. If it can't, it might not sell. So when I look at the next set, which is Cyberstorm Access, what I've seen so far is that a lot of these cards are pretty either okay or underwhelming, and I would be very concerned that people would not buy these cards. Uh, Knowing that they could just be playing the Kashtira deck. So I think that's another thing as
Mm.
well, where they put the power limit on
It's
Kashtira. They lower the
it's
power limit on
very
Kashtira
funny
so that they can
that
sell new cards.
yeah, well like it's funny because traditionally I think the slot where that whatever the Cyberstorm, whatever the fuck it is,
Yeah.
the slot that usually has is the set we get before our WCQ season, right? Like that's where it would be at. So we
Yes,
would
it
get
will
our
be.
January
It'll
set, and
So
then
be
that
yeah,
would be
Photon Hypernova is
yeah,
in February,
yeah,
and then that'll be 3 months after that. So February, March, April, May. So that'll be around May.
yeah.
We should get
and
Cyberstorm
that should
So
Access.
be our
that'll be like the
WCQ set.
pre WCQ set, and traditionally those sets have been very good, right? Like I'm pretty sure each one has been like ridiculously impactful, on and off.
I'd argue Difo
Uh,
wasn't the greatest,
yeah. Well,
but
for other regions it was Power
yeah,
of the
that's
Elements.
okay. Well, that's not the same at all, but yes.
I know, like different circumstances. But yeah, so it would be weird in like a
We've only
post-COVID
seen like
world.
a third of Cyberstorm Access. So
Yeah,
the
I,
other
I did
one,
I did see a list and it was just like 10 cards have been revealed or something, right?
yeah, well, more than that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 20, or like
I was hoping
30 or
you'd
something
stop
like
at like
that. Yeah,
13.
no,
Oh
it's like
well.
30 out
That's
of like
fine. That's fine.
the 80. So yeah.
Yeah, so like that I guess like you sort of have to water everything down, make the new set relevant enough to sell going into that season because like as a Worlds again, haha, surprise, like you have to buy this new set to compete. Even like I'm trying to think of like the absolute low end set of like a World season sort of thing. I feel
And
like Dane was relevant. Like all of them have just been real. Like Flood has been relevant. I just don't know. Like I have to dig deep, into the
Cross
trenches to
Souls
find
was
a set
probably
that.
the weakest one, but
Yeah,
even then,
yeah. Like that's it, right?
And whatever
Yeah.
It's like
whatever the 2016
2015
set
still, if you go back
was.
to it.
What was the
Yeah,
what was
I don't.
the
Oh,
2016 set?
that was
Shining
Shiv.
Victories. That
Yeah.
set was pretty
Shiva.
bad. That set was pretty bad for the TCG for that
Yeah.
context.
So the next limited card we have is this. We got this. So this is surprising to me because it's Tellarknight Ptolemaeus, which we just got to 3.
Yeah, that is.
No.
So it's very strange to me that Japan would just put this to 1.
I think Japan just still has PTSD of how ridiculous that card was for them, for that solid, like, chunk when it was like able to make as a thought, or it was able to do the infinity stuff, like
Yeah.
that's just like they're probably just like, oh, someone will do something crazy like that again, haha. It's like, oh, you're paying
So
no attention to TCG,
So
it's
I
fine.
think it's more of just how Japan does things, where I
Mm.
rarely see things go from like forbidden to 3 or 1 to 3. So even if you look at their or unlimited, all the cards that are on their unlimited list went from 2 to 3. So I think they always just tend to go from like unlimited to 1 to 2 to 3. Like I'm sure that
And
on the next list they get,
every single semi is from 1 to 2. Every single one, and there are a
yeah.
ton.
So I think
Oh no, there's
we'll
one
just
that isn't.
see what's it called, the Ptolemaios go to 2 on their next list. If it goes to 3, I'll be very. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
won't be that surprised because we have it at 3, but yeah, looking at their stuff, it's always like 1 to 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. Um, so not surprising that they got this back. We just got to 3. But after that, we
Well,
have
hold up. So on
Magnemite.
the Ptolemaeus note, if everything does, get salted and the Earth is bare, maybe Ptolemaeus can shine and actually do something. But yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
next card, Magnemite.
I think we all saw this card getting limited eventually. I think
Yeah.
basically everyone
Yes.
does.
Absolutely.
Um,
This is less bestial support, more dragon support, and more dragon support and oppressive to light and dark
And
strategies, right? Like
this is
it's
a
a very
card
silly
that I
card.
think putting it at 1. Ordinarily, I'm very vehemently against putting cards at 1. I think they should either be at 3 or 0. This is a card that I think putting at 1 makes a lot of sense because in an actual bestial deck, you can search
it.
this with Lubellion,
Yeah.
and then
You can loop it with
yeah,
regained. You can do a
yeah,
bunch of stuff
like
with it. Yeah.
it actually it being at 1 is very crucial for a bestial deck, which I think that deck is actually quite fun. I think the bestial Lubellion is a very cool card.
Yeah.
So
But
like you now still have the swing of like, oh, I drew it going second, right? And like I think drawing that card going second as like a point of interaction is big because it generates another card. It puts a 25 on board, right? All the other bestials just put a guy on board. They might have an effect, but it's not really relevant compared to what Magnemite is doing, which is just like generating an additional part of the follow up. But now, as you said, in like a more traditional sense, like this is turning into like an engine card more than anything. Like you have more chance of drawing it. I mean, well, not sorry, more chance of drawing like a Lubellion, either going first or going second, and searching Magnemite that way, right? So it's sort of like just slowing it down, essentially, like decreasing the chance of you drawing it.
yeah, it makes it less
But on that
splashable.
note, I
Yeah.
I hate putting cards like that to 1 though, right? Because I think there's still this big disparity when there
Well, I
are
don't.
light and
Well,
dark.
no, no. I don't think you can say cards like that to 1. This is not a card that is like that to 1 because no other card.
Yeah,
This is
I know what you mean, but I think it's still swingy enough when you are going second and you are
I don't
resolving
think
a single
anybody's
copy of
playing this card in
Magnemite.
their deck unless they're playing a
yeah.
bestial deck now, is what I'm saying. Like, I don't
I
think a bestial
or
engine
yeah,
is like a
right,
thing
No,
yeah.
but
anymore.
that's what like I think when there are like other light and dark decks and like Bestial still exists, I think Magnemite is going to be one of those cards where like, oh, you drew the one Magnemite and now it's generating like another, like it's kind of oppressive in that sense. But I think like putting it to 1 is fine. Like I agree with, like it can't disappear, right? But I think there is an issue where it's just like, oh, like you're drawing, like now I'm upset if my opponent draws the 1 copy of Magnemite, right? It's at 3. If they draw it and it's at 1 and I'm playing a light or dark deck
Right.
going
I mean, that's how
first,
I
then
feel
I'm
about
going to be
every card
very upset.
ever. I'm just saying specifically
No.
because this is a card that supports like a larger archetype.
Mm.
Putting it at 1 means you get rewarded for playing the actual bestial archetype. You'll have access to it significantly more often. If you're
Yeah.
just splashing a bestial deck, it's very unlikely you'll actually draw. If you're playing a full bestial package, then your opponent goes Lubellion for Magnemite, you go, like maybe that's what it turns into. Like maybe that's what you end up splashing against light and dark decks now is like Lubellion
Yeah.
gets splashed in to get the Magnemite, and then you play some other stuff. Instead of just like 3 Magnemite, 1 Druid's Worm. Okay, my deck is done.
I got you.
So the next card is Black Green Season of the Cloak. We have this card as well.
It's kind of
Hulk
bad.
Hulk is banned everywhere. So
Yeah.
um,
Even in international waters of Master Duel, it's banned.
yes. And then we have Change of Heart, which we also have. That's not surprising. The next thing, which it- first of all was like really, but then it goes back to the conversation we had about what do you play after Tearlaments are gone. And the next card that was limited was Branded Fusion. So originally, like I said, I was very confused by this, but I thought, oh, people would probably go to the Kashtira deck, and then they probably thought, well, what if they don't play Kashtira? And they're like, well, it's probably they're branded because Branded still has a shit ton of cards, um,
And got more cards.
and got more cards. Yes. So they're like, okay, well, we don't want people to play Branded either, because so let's put Branded Fusion to one.
I think branded. So I think you can still make a branded deck. And again, I will once again show my favorite card ever, Branded in High Spirits. I think when Photon Hypernova comes out, which Japan has obviously, and they get the Cartesia Fusion Monster. Now the
Yeah,
Fusion
that card is
Monster
so good.
is Cartesia plus a light or dark. When that card comes out, and it has an effect that's like good if it's like in the graveyard, like it's just an insane card.
Yeah.
You can just
Mm.
play. So the issue with Branded in High Spirits, I think currently, is you're either just searching Lubellion, and then you're just cycling a card, and that's fine. That's like a fine, like steady, like mid-range card. Or you're just going combo, 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 and you're searching Cartesia. And then the problem with Cartesia is that's just like a brick in your deck because currently, because Cartesia can only make level 8 or higher. Level 8 or higher, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Level 8 or higher fusions, it can be kind of awkward in the Tearlament deck. If Cartesia could just make Kit Kalos, it would just be the best card ever. Like you just probably play 3. Like it would actually just be the best card ever. But when the new Cartesia fusion comes out, it means you can actually just fuse Cartesia plus a tier, and it will trigger the tier, and you'll get your guy, and then you'll get your pretty good Cartesia
Well,
fusion monster also. And
But not only does
Japan,
it let you trigger a tier, its effect when it's summoned lets you Foolish Burial a later Dark
yeah,
Monster.
like Lubellion, huh?
Yeah.
Or Magnamut, I guess,
Well,
Mhm.
I was gonna
something
say
like that.
another tier monster if you wanted to put
No,
activate another
I'm pretty sure
tier.
it's level
Yeah.
6
So
or
yeah.
higher, light or dark. I'm pretty sure it can't
Oh,
send a tier
okay.
monster.
I thought it was 6 or lower. Yeah, no,
No, no,
you're
no. I
right.
believe
Yeah.
it's 6
So
or higher. I believe it's 6 or
no,
higher specifically, so you can't do that.
yeah. I just clicked on it. It is. I thought it
Yeah,
was 6 or lower, but it's
no.
6 or higher.
But
So
I
you
think
can
you just
send your
send a Lubellion,
mag.
honestly. That's probably what they like want you to do. Anyway, so like that's a strong branded card. And you can, and the Cartesia Fusion monster is a spellcaster, I believe, with branded in high spirit stats. So you
Yes.
can trigger Shaddolls with it, which is very, very relevant. So Branded in High Spirits can discard a Shaddol, send the Cartesia Fusion monster, which has a good grave effect when it's in your graveyard. You just send it there for free. You search a Cartesia, and now you trigger your Shaddol, and now your Cartesia is a way to fusion summon on both players' turns. And you can either make Cartesia's a light, yes? So you can make
Yes.
Construct with the Cartesia, because Construct is level 8, or you can use it to fuse something else. You can use like a Shaddol and a different light and make something. But you're probably just going to use itself and a Shaddol to make a construct, and then just get going that way. And you can probably set up some really really ignorant Schism Winda stuff. In fact, just
Yeah.
by doing that, you can just send Schism with construct, make Gravity Controller, and then get Schism. And I'm sure adding multiple branded fusions into that deck would just be a very, very frustrating experience. You could probably add Public Good Judgment into that, honestly, and then when you're done, you just get a Jowgen from your deck. Who knows? Like, that's not even terrible. I think that deck actually seems like, if we get, like, a Salted Earth ban list like this, I think that will be the first deck I'll try to put together, honestly.
Probably same because I love the branded cards, and I
Yeah.
think I think they sound extremely powerful between the branded and the between the branded cards and the bestials and whatever else. I think there's a make. I mean, I already think like that deck was like pretty playable in the um before the Mavens cards came out.
Yeah.
Like I quite liked it.
Yeah.
But with Grand Ganul, the final dragon, with that card and a hefty forbidden list, I think it would
Mm.
be like really crazy.
Yeah. And I think
Gabagool,
if
the
Branded
final
Fusion
drag.
is at 3, in OCG. Now they've hit everything else. I feel like that deck just gets even crazier, right? Because there's another new Albaz fusion also, which is like a negate or something. Like it's just yeah. I just think if Random Fusion's at 3 there, it's probably even crazier. Like I think that deck is still probably good in Japan. I think there's still probably a way to build it. That's like pretty reasonable. But let's finish through everything, then we can talk about what we think the decks there like might look like. But I think that's why Brandon Fusion got limited. I think that deck sounds very, very strong.
Yeah. So then that leads us into the semi-limiteds, which are, you guys love talking and yelling about that, so I'll leave it to you.
So a bunch of cards went from 1 to 2. I'm just going to quickly run through all of them because I don't think any of them matter. Galatea went from 1 to 2. I think they have 1 Harp Horror, so that deck is like maybe relevant with 2 Galatea, but such a bizarre thing, honestly. Swap Frog went from 1 to 2. Weird. Toad is banned there, but Ronin Toad is not, so maybe they can do something with Swap Frog. Probably not, but maybe. Kagari went from limited to semi-limited. I think this one is very interesting. I think Sky Striker might be a real deck in Japan now. So you limit Magnamut, right? And you got rid of, presumably, the best Ishizu deck. Sky Striker's getting more support, and now you're giving them
not that good. But
no, it's getting more support. Like there's more that we don't know. It's getting like
what's been announced so far has been
it's not been that good. I agree, but there's even more support coming, and now you give them a second Kagari. I think the second Kagari. So I think so. Why a second Kagari matters so much for them is they already have 2 engage, and I believe they have 3 multi-roll. I don't think that matters that much, but I believe they have 3 multi-roll. Let me just confirm that real quick. They do. They have three multi-roll. So they have 3 multi-roll and they have 2 engage. Now they have 2 Kagari. So I personally think, obviously, if you have 1 Kagari, that's infinitely better than having 0. But I think once you get a second Kagari, that's also very important. And I think it's pretty unlikely the game goes long enough you make the third one, to be honest. So I think having a second one is like the ideal point where like going from 3 to 2 is not that big of a loss. Like it's pretty negligible. And once you have 2, I feel like you can get a lot of longevity from this deck, and it can just kind of do what it's trying to do, especially now that, like Magnum, it won't be bullying Ray as much anymore. Your Ray won't get shuffled back off of Shizu. This deck is getting more support. I think this definitely can be like a contender, I think. Maybe the Sky Striker cards really have just gotten power crept, and I'm not thinking about it clearly, but I personally think with this change, they have a really good chance of being, because every deck just got obliterated, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like it has a reasonable chance.
It'll be quite open initially, and then obviously we have the next set coming out. I wouldn't be surprised to see Sky Striker performing in OCG, and then like if the new support is good, then obviously there'll be a buff.
Could this be why Goods got semi-limited?
Just
like, take it, Sky Striker.
That would make some sense. Yeah, potentially, right?
I mean, because I don't know. I had to walk away for a second, but they still have like 2. What is limited there? It's just
they have 2 engage, 2 Kagari, and they have 3, and they have 1 Hornet Drones. Everything else is at 3.
Yeah, so I mean, I think they love this deck so much.
I know. I think this deck is going to be pretty good there. Like actually, they just hit everything else, and they just also Right going to 2, and then Enchantress going to 3. Griffin is banned. However, I have pretty long maintained that it's definitely possible to just play like a Link deck with the adventure cards without Griffin. And I think it's like, can't you just... Is there a way with just...
Activating Right is 3 spells, right?
Yeah. Okay, so activating Right is 3 spells. It's Right, Fateful Adventure, and Draco back. Assuming the Fateful Adventure eventually makes its way to your graveyard.
Yeah. Like just cold generates 2 spells.
Yeah. Is there a way to make the new Sky Striker?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Link 2 needs a dark and a light, or needs 2 darks or 2 lights.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can turn Enchantress into Artemis, or you can just search Illegal Knight, but you can't turn the token into a light or dark. I guess there's no Link 1. Okay, whatever. But
It's 2 lights or 2 darks, not you can't do 1 in light and
Oh,
1 dark.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Okay,
2
Yeah.
lights
no,
or 2 darks.
no, I said, is it? I don't remember.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure there was like some heavy restriction that made it a lot more awkward.
Isn't it? Hold on. I'll find it.
Skystriker, what's their name? Skystriker? Where is it?
I don't know. This is important. This definitely affects its playability significantly. Where is this card? What is it called? Oh my god.
I can't remember what it's called, yes.
Yeah.
Azalea. I wanted to say
Azalea. Yeah.
Amethyst.
2 light and or dark
And
monsters.
or
Okay,
dark
okay.
monsters.
So you can
Okay,
mix
so
and
okay.
match.
You
Okay.
can mention max. So
Yeah.
is there a link monster you can make that's a light
With the
or dark
token. I don't
with
think
the
you can.
token?
I don't think so.
Not with the token, but I'm saying
No.
that you can make in general and then bring a monster back.
Land Fornicus.
Oh, I mean, you can. So you can make Lina. So Fateful Adventure. If you play the prerequisite, like monster to search, or rather, right? I guess if you play the proper one, and I guess Griffin's banned in Japan, so you can't have a wind anymore. It can make any charmer.
Yeah.
The most realistic ones would be Lina and Dark, because if you play Artemis, you can turn Enchantress into Artemis and then make Lina. And if you play Illegal Knight, which is the other like reasonable one, you can make Dark. So those will always be able to bring something back, presumably. Like assuming your opponent has a card engrave, you can bring something back, and then you can make the new Striker Link, and then the new Striker Link will let you turn that into Kagari or Shizuku or Hayate, right? So I feel like it's definitely possible you have some sort of adventure striker deck that does something. Because Dracoback is still a very reasonable card. Just getting Enchantresses to keep adding back rights is a way to just keep link fodder up. You can make what's the new? Hold on, what's this card called? You can make Donner with a right token and Enchantress. So you can essentially, by activating right and discarding a card, you can have removal for 2 cards because you get Draco back, and then you can make Donner, which will then pop something else, and then Enchantress.
The for hire.
The for hire link, and then the Enchantress will always add back another right. So you'll just always have more like fodder. So I think that's a very like reasonable engine, honestly, to play just like for more spells. I don't think that's terrible. Maybe getting a little bit maybe straying a bit too far from like what Sky Striker's like trying to do. But I personally think even if Griffin is banned, you can just play and then like 3 Enchantress, 2 right, Fateful, Draco back, and just like play them as like removal, and you make Charmers with them, and you make the new Striker and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because like with Donner or whatever, you can definitely just go like Draco back, get rid of your thing, make Donner, pop itself in something else, and now you have it cleared from your extra monster zone. So then you can summon Ray or whatever and make a link monster and make all your Sky Striker plays.
Mm-hmm. So I think that could be pretty interesting. Infernity Launcher goes to 2. I don't think that matters at all. I feel like that's a little bit too far gone. I know they got new cards in Rise of the Duelist, or Phantom Rage maybe, but I don't think that matters.
Yeah, I don't think it does either.
And then going from 3 to 2, Foolish Burial Goods, as we touched on, and Raigeki, that is so random to me and so funny.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it. It's just because it was that card was sided a little bit against a couple of decks. Like, is that why they hit it? Like, is that it? Just because it was.
And it had to have been. This is what I said. Like when they like looked at when they saw like Foolish Burial Goods, they just kind of like looked at what people were playing, and they're like, all right, we see a lot of people using this card, so it has to be good.
It's like here's a tier deck that sided Raigeki. I'm just looking at like deck lists.
It's probably like top percentage on Neuron or something, right? Like submitted decks from OCG
that was
region.
something that I was like gonna bring up also when we're talking about like the barrier statue, right? I think it's interesting that like the barrier statue got banned in Master Duel right before it got banned in the OCG. And I think it's interesting we're seeing Master Duel maybe like inform some of their decisions now, which I think could be a good thing, could be a bad thing depending on how it's implemented. But so far, I wonder if just they have the data. I wonder how nuanced their data is for these decks to the point that like not about like win rate of cards, right? Like I don't really care what barrier statues win rate. I wonder if their data is so nuanced that they can see like how often an opponent just immediately clicked surrender when the barrier statue got
That would
summoned.
also be kind of funny.
I
I
wonder
think the other
if
thing
like
to note as well would be if they see deck list, right? And the
yeah,
barrier statue is at 1. Because we've seen that countless times where they put a card to 1 that just like was already played at 1, right?
yes.
So now it's just like, hey, we're seeing all of these deck lists from Neuron, Master Duel. They're all playing 1 barrier statue.
It didn't even
Why
occur
would
to
we put
me
it to
how much
1?
data collection they probably have for deck lists on Neuron too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I was I was really tunneling on Master Duel, but I wonder how much they take into account the popularity of decks on Neuron. That's very interesting. I'm sure like it means something, but obviously
Yeah, I
a
think
little
that's where
bit more
Regeki sort
nuanced.
of came from more than anything.
Yeah, possibly.
Just like
I mean,
having
it's
that information, right? Like you see these deck lists
I
more
think y'all are
now.
giving them too much credit. I think they just saw some deck list with Urigeki on it. They're like, oh, let's
No, no,
hit
no,
it.
no, no. That's what I mean. No, like Regeki probably had like one of the higher percentages on like submitted side decks or something. You know what I mean? Like that's why they're like, oh, put it to 2. Like it's not good. So,
So,
but like they're
well,
just looking
also,
at the numbers,
I
right?
don't
yeah.
even know if that's true because if you look at a lot of the decks, I think with even more than that is
Mm.
the a pointer of the Red Lotus. I think you see that infinitely more than Regeki in the side deck
Oh,
in the decks.
maybe that one's coming next. Who knows?
Well, I hope.
I also think it's
Yeah.
weird to hit side cards, especially with this data that we're talking about, because Master Duel doesn't have a side deck. I think it's probably they have less information on side patterns, right?
Oh no, I just meant like with more people in Japan probably using Neuron
Yeah.
than anything else, right? It's like
I mean, I agree. Also, the Japanese YCS is also not having a side deck is also something that like maybe we won't see side deck cards get hit as frequently, and Raigeki might kind of just be an outlier. It also only went to 2. Like that's another like
Yeah.
bizarre thing to me, but whatever.
And
Unlimited.
the last card is late stage.
Oh,
so
light
2.
stage went to 2. Yeah, we have that
Okay.
at 2 now also, right? That just went to 2 for us. That doesn't really matter. I believe that also just went to 2 for us, but where is
not
it?
just.
No, it just went to
probably-
3 for
I think it went
us.
to 3.
Yeah,
It just went to
just
3.
3.
Yeah, it just went to
Yes.
3. It went from
It's
1 to
been
2
done
and
at
then just
2.
went to 3. Yeah. So sure. I
Unlimited.
guess. Yeah.
ABC Buster Dragon. Irrelevant.
Yes.
Every single
Double
one of
iron.
these cards that are unlimited, we also have at 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every single one we also have at 3. Yeah, that's true.
Double Iris irrelevant. Enchantress irrelevant.
I don't think
Steals,
that one's irrelevant. I don't think that one's irrelevant. I think that one. Well,
Which
okay. How
one?
about this?
Enchantress?
That one is infinitely more relevant than Buster and Double Iris Magician.
Yeah, sure.
Like,
and then obviously Torn Scales and Eldlixir, which is just at 3 here. Yeah.
yeah.
Very.
I think Sanguine going to 3 there. Okay, let me check what other Eldritch cards they have hit, because that is a deck that they also really like. They have Cursed Eldland at 2, and that's it. Everything else is at 3 now. They had 2 Cursed Eldland and 2 Sanguine. So, do they still have 3 Reasoning and 3 Monster Gate?
Yeah, I believe so.
Let me check. They do still have 3 Reasoning, and they do still have 3 Monster Gate. I don't know. I don't think you'd play Monster Gate in this deck, but and how about Grass? And they still have 2 Grass. Hilarious. They really like the Eldritch Grass deck. Like they love that deck with 3 Reasoning, Grass, minimal monsters, and maybe we'll see them splash some of the Ishizu shufflers into that type of deck and just try that, right? Because that's, I guess now that we've gone through the list, let's just kind of like, where do you go from here, right? As Bohdan said multiple times, literally scorched the earth and then salted it, so no new creatures can ever grow again. You know, like, what are we doing here?
From the ashes, you release a bunch of new good cards in the new set and repeat the cycle.
So that's what I was thinking. Was when I saw this list, I was like, my initial reaction for whatever reason was, oh my god, Cyberstorm Access must be crazy. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, wait, it's probably not good. Like, Cyberstorm Access probably isn't crazy, and that's why they had to do this, right? I think as Jeff was touching on earlier, it's like they did this maybe so you play. Like I read the Mana Dome cards and they seem all right.
Yeah,
Mana Dome
just
is
all
the new
right.
like
Yeah,
planet deck with Visa Starfrost. Yeah, they
Starfrost.
seem
Yeah,
they're like inoffensive. They're like pretty cool, I guess. They
and I'm
when
pretty
I
sure like it's another synchro deck, which is weird because we've been getting a lot of synchro decks lately, and that set is also going to have the second wave of support for the new World Premiere deck, which is another synchro deck.
oh, I
So we're
forgot
getting
about
a
that.
shit ton of synchro
We
shit.
also just
So
got the Goaty, which was also a synchro deck.
which was
Yeah, there's a
yeah,
lot of synchro decks. That's I guess because maybe I wonder. Do you think they had all of these ideas for cards and just didn't print them because of fiber? That wouldn't shock me. You think they maybe designed or rather they didn't design synchro cards because of fiber, and now that fiber's banned, they're like, I can finally design the synchro card I've always wanted to make. You know,
that
something like
well,
that.
we did have Moyi deck, so
Well,
I don't
that
know.
one specifically was like you can't link with the token, right?
Right.
Like that was the extent of just like how do we make a synchro deck that can't use fiber often, and then they just said you cannot make links.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
now it's gone. It's now they print
Yeah,
more synchro. However, the first card that we saw of ours, the golden
was
was it like
not very
gold?
good.
Well,
Yeah,
that card was just
Yeah.
basically just unplayable. Like it did, like not only could you not even use fiber anyway, you couldn't do like a shit ton of other things. So I'm like, okay, fiber's banned. This card isn't level 2. This card can't do anything by itself. It locks you into basically everything under the sun. So I don't know, but you could definitely use fiber with the new Mana Dome deck. That's for sure.
yeah.
But still, I digress. As the question originally was, where do we go from here? I think that um, if you don't use Cashier and Tearlaments, you have Floowandereeze. I think a big one that you have is Labyrinth, which we did see
Oh
some
yeah,
before, and they have
Labyrinth.
that new card.
They have the
Yeah.
new girl.
You have the new girl, and they have that new trap card, which is phenomenal for them. And I think the other one would be Pendulum.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true because they have the Draco
They have
Slayer. Well, we
Electro.
have Draco Slayers, and they have an Electromite. They only have one
Yeah,
luster. I don't think that matters too much.
I don't think it matters that
Obviously,
much.
getting Electromite matters more than losing a couple luster pendulums. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but
pendulum is probably
I think Labyrinth is like a real big one, honestly. And then because it also doesn't hit by Max E really.
yeah.
Um, and after that would be yeah, like it also maybe like Runic, something with like Runic in it, because they still have all the Runic
Yeah, they
cards.
never
And
really played. We never really saw them play Runic much in
yeah,
OCG. We never that never really caught on. I don't think. Maybe we'll see the Naturia Shizu deck kind of pop up again. Now that the Tier Element stuff is now that like the deck that was the de facto best Ishizu deck is gone, I think we'll probably see a bunch of experimentation with the Ishizu cards. They have one Agito and one Keldo, I believe, right?
yeah.
So maybe we'll see some experimentation with the Ishizu stuff in a different deck. Obviously weaker than if it's all F3, but I
All right,
digress.
so yeah, going back and looking back at the metagame reports for OCG, the last 4 of them, outside of Tearlaments being the most played, then Kastir being second, the third most played deck, and basically all of these is Labyrinth. So I feel pretty confident in saying that yeah, Labyrinth will probably be the go-to deck before the Cyberstorm Access set.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that deck was strong when it could like really heavily target, and I feel like trap decks like that are at their best when they can really heavily target down the decks they want to beat. So when you're going into like a super wide format like this, I guess you just have to play like as generic traps as possible and just like hope you catch whatever. I feel like, hang on, what Flunder cards are hit there? I think they have map at 2 or something
I believe
irrelevant.
map is at 1. I just looked
Map
at a
is at
second ago.
1.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Map is at 1. Okay, that deck's probably not very good. That's funny.
Yeah, so it's map at 1 and then banned for
I feel
the
like they could have put map
barrier
back.
statue.
If they were gonna ban barrier statue, I feel like they can put map back.
They
But
also have
whatever.
Shifter at 2, which is
Yeah.
not relevant.
Yeah, that's whatever. So I guess the first thing is I don't think tier elements are playable at all.
Well,
I'm
yeah.
sure we'll be. So it's funny. a video came up on my Facebook feed that was like Tearlaments deck post January 1st ban list, and I watched the video, and it was like the worst deck I had ever seen. You know, it was one of those videos that was supposed to be like, look how much the deck can still do, like even after it got banned, and it literally looked like it was on life support and was just waiting for somebody to put it down. And I was just like, it looked
It reminds me of
awful.
just like the Mean Girls meme, where it's like, stop trying to make Tearlaments happen. It's
Yeah,
not going to
yes,
happen.
literally. And then I feel like maybe Kashtira is still playable. Maybe. It's definitely way less consistent and less suppressive, but maybe
It only has 3 starters now, and it has without those 3, it's like very hard to do anything. You can't lead with any of the other Kashira cards, so I don't really know how you would make it work honestly with only 1 field spell and 1 of each of the cards you need to open up with. So it's only 3 total.
terraforming,
Yeah,
set
it's
rotation with a bad field spell. Maybe you play Ravine. What is level 4? Does level 4 one do anything? If you can make Ancient Fairy Dragon and search planet and search level 4 and like
He
special
says
with
if you
Ancient Fairy
control a
Dragon.
Kashtira, you can summon them from your hand, and then once returned, you can banish a Kashtira card from your deck to make him level 7.
Okay, so can you do like Destrudo, Ravine, pop Ravine, get the planet, search that guy, special him with Ancient Fairy Dragon, and like banish a Kostira from your deck and like make him 7 and like do stuff? That doesn't seem like the absolute worst. That seems like a line at least. Maybe.
So you have to have that means you have to summon another level 4 monster then to do that.
Well, you can summon anything plus Destrudo. Like you just normal summon anything, right? Plus Destrudo.
So when you say anything, you have to think about this realistically. Like, what other monster are you adding into your deck to?
I don't know. Planet Pathfinder, which
Destrudo.
you would just activate and get
Which
planet,
you would activate
and then
anyway,
get
yeah.
Unicorn anyway, which is another starter, I guess. Like
Yeah.
maybe that's what it is. Maybe they just go Planet Pathfinder.
Yeah, they max
Ravine.
it on Planet Pathfinder.
Yeah, they max it on Pathfinder, Ravine, Prosperity.
Do they actually have Destrudo?
I'm nearly certain they have Destrudo. They do have Destrudo. They do.
Okay.
I didn't realize that Destrudo was no. It's at 3 there. It's at 1 for us. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
It's at 3 for them. But yeah. So I feel like of Kashtira and Tyr, I think Kashtira is significantly more playable. Because if you just draw a Unicorn, it is the same deck, right? Like if you just draw the field spell, you resolve your sequence of cards identically as you did before. It's just obviously you'll do it less consistently. Tearlaments is like, I don't even know what you do anymore.
You're not doing anything.
Yeah, like you're doing significantly less and significantly less often. So, I really just think Kashtira is maybe a deck. I don't know. Maybe, like I'm sure there are some other like bad psychic supports that you can just fit in and do it. You can maybe try to play like other level 7 extenders and just play like a Shangri-La control deck. I think maybe you play the adventure cards in that deck again, which I think arguably you might even do here, and you just get a level 7 extender off of that, right?
Yeah, because possibly.
That seems a little bit more reasonable. Maybe play instant contact to get like Dark Neos or whatever, just to make a 7.
So this also just seems like a lot of work to do something when you just go with like the path of least resistance with other decks. Which
I agree with you. Yeah. Although that's the thing is like, what is the path of least resistance when every deck that was being played is like not. So personally, I still think the branded in High Spirits should all deck with Cartesia is what I would try to make first.
One thing there also is that they have branded opening at 1 there also, so that's like another thing where like you just cutting you off from branded fusion.
Yeah. Sure, but you can still. But so there's 3 High Spirits, 3 Aluber, presumably.
Yeah.
So 3 High Spirits, 3 Aluber, 1 opening, 1 branded fusion, some Shadalls, maybe Shadal fusion, and Cartesias, and like Fallen of Albaz. I don't know. You know, I definitely see the cracks when you only have 1 branded fusion and 1 what's it called? Oping. Maybe you play Goods and Retribution, and you hope you draw Albion and Goods. Goods is at 2 though, so you'll even do that less consistently. Where you'll Albion Foolish Branded Fusion and then Goods Foolish Retribution and add back Branded Fusion. All right.
Yeah, yeah, it could be like some Brandon High Spirits thing. Could be kind of cool. I'm trying to think of what else is at. Let's see. We have still like what we talked about very briefly, or like Runic. They still have all the Runic cards.
Yeah.
You
And
could
like I
see
think a
like Runic
small
Sprite.
sprite.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Runic Sprite might just be you have one starter and one Jeb, you still have 3 blue. Like maybe that's just fine enough, right?
And then you have basically full power Pendulum deck. They could. So I mean that seems like very easy outside of like Maxi. I think that deck is extremely strong.
Yeah. So they definitely have some options. They also still have Chaos Ruler. They can just play punk stuff.
Yeah, they do have Chaos
They just still
Ruler.
have Chaos Ruler. Yeah.
Another deck which I think was more popular here, simply because again of Maxi, is Math Mech as well.
That is true. Yeah. Yeah,
That's our
they
deck
have
that
some
functions off.
options. All of these are definitely
one
weaker than
card.
what they've been doing. So like, I'm kind of interested to see where they're gonna go from here. But my vote is definitely still on some scuffed shit all adventure. Oh, you can also play adventure in that shit all deck and like Magician Souls, and adventure triggers the shit alls, and you like make. You can make
Okay, well,
is
that's
it,
what they did. Well, kind of before. That's what they did before with the branded cards. They were playing that, and we were like, "Why are they doing that? Like, you can't even if you draw that into Luber, your deck sucks." So like that does cut you off from normal summoning a Luber, which is definitely like the best card in your deck, I think now.
yeah. You can also make Proxy F Magician and Fusion Summon.
You can do that
using your adventure stuff, I guess. Schism is still a broken card. Is the Nadir Servant still at 1 for them? I feel like it probably is.
Nadir.
It is.
Yes.
Nadir Servant still at 1. Okay. I don't know how they build decks. Every card is at 1. Every good card is gone there now. Every single good card I want to put in my deck is gone. But maybe that's how you fit everything. Maybe because I'm talking about like 15 different engines, maybe if you take every single card I mentioned and put them all in the same deck, it somehow reaches 40 cards. And then you'll just have like 19 one-ofs that are broken when you draw them. And then that's your deck.
19 one-ofs.
Just 19 broken
like,
one-ofs.
So it's like old formats we were talking about before, where all the old formats are just one.
Your deck is just one Nadir Servant, one Branded Fusion, one Branded Opening, like just one Foolish Burial, just one of every broken card that supports this archetype. One Fenrir, one Unicorn, one Planet. Might as well, because why not? You know? Oh my god. Just play every limited card. And if you one Magnuma, sure, Lubellion, you might even play Lubellion even. You know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Eventually this deck makes 60 or 40, I promise. One's Public Judgment. Blue guy. Knowledge. Knowledge is probably good in the shit all deck. Alright. This deck's coming together.
We figured it out.
Right is 2 spells for Public Judgment. So that's something.
I hate you.
Yeah. And Tactics to finish it all off. And Super Poly. And Instant Fusion. Might as well. That card's not banned yet.
Yeah, but now you can't summon Kiklos.
That is true. That is a lot worse. You can summon Winda.
You can't summon Winda, yes.
Alright, we did it. So my prediction, Shawl is the best deck in Japan.
I'm still going to go with Trap Deck Labyrinth. That deck seems really, really strong right now. I don't know. I think January 1st we'll see a lot of Labyrinth coming up on these OCG meta reports.
Probably.
I don't know what anything comes out before then for Japan. Let's see.
I don't think
so. Well, there's a Jump Festa this weekend.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Stuff that probably won't come out by January 1st, but that'll be another topic.
Yeah, I guess that's the last. So we've been going a long time, so let's kind of wrap it up. But yeah, there's a Jump Festa this weekend, so it's very possible they'll have a big Yu-Gi-Oh announcement, and then if they do, I guess that's what we'll be covering next week. Probably.
Yeah, this could all be for nothing. Right?
This could all be for nothing, and they could announce. Yeah, they could announce.
Duel Master Rule, whatever the fuck it is, and then just change Yu-Gi-Oh again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why they banned everything, because there's a huge. That's why they yeah.
I mean, I would I would kind of hope for that to happen, honestly. So ever since, I mean, I would like to wrap this up, but
Yeah.
ever since COVID started, I have lost a lot of my passion for Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think a lot of that is because Yu-Gi-Oh! Just hasn't changed since 2019, basically. All we see over and over again are just like rehashes of old decks. It's basically like, oh, let's put a new spin on Shadal's, and what if we made it Shadal's plus Lightsworn, and like it's still like the same things we see over and over and over again, basically. And like, oh, let's put a deck and we'll give it a Searcher and a Stratos and a Rhoda, and that just becomes so repetitive and boring to me. I've seen it all before, and I think the only way like to like reignite my love and passion for the game is to see a significant change, whether that be with, I don't think they have to make like a new, we could make a whole another podcast about that, but I don't think they have to make a new extra deck archetype, but I think they could make a new type of card. You see Pokemon and Magic and all these other games, they come out with new types of cards all the time. And the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh hasn't done that since Lynx, I think really has made the game very stale for me, because we're just seeing the same shit put out over and over again and just slapping new art on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it
Good
is to the
shake
point
up would
where
would be
almost every
good.
card comes out and we look at it and go, what does that do? And we say, it's a blank that blanks. Like, oh,
Yes.
what is Magnum? It's a DD Crow for lights and darks that is Stratos for dragons. Like, what? You know, like, okay, sure.
Or now it's like, oh, it's Tenki, but also this or whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly.
oh, field spell. Oh, what does the field spell do? I bet it searches. I bet
Eight things. Yeah.
So yeah, to wrap things up, I hope that that our list is as significant as this.
Me too.
I'd like to start playing some new cards, and I hope that the Jump Festa has some cool news. So I don't know about you guys, what your finishing thoughts are.
I think I
No,
agree
I think
completely.
this ban list is like uh good. I like it's good to know that OCG has it in them to just completely, just Thanos click, get rid of
they
all these
actually
cards.
Yeah,
they actually
yeah.
did
Yeah.
snap half the Tearlaments out of existence. That is
No.
true.
It's I am
Yeah,
Konami.
literally, and then just all the Tearlaments just go into dust, of course.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if because like usually when Japan does something drastic like this, that means that it's like it's likely that USA can have a little bit more wiggle room, right? Like I say that they probably still, just as limited. But yeah, like it's good to know that Japan will do something like this. Maybe TCG can translate it. And then obviously we have the Jump Fester announcement, which could be a master rule change, could be new support, could be whatever. And that'll dictate more of OCG than I guess us for the time being, right? Like
Yeah,
or we'll see is maybe some like market shift for some cards, maybe some like anticipated buyouts, depending on if there's a master rule changes, some cards just get better. But for the most part, I think we're really just gonna end up playing the same game until next season, right? And I guess like Worlds will be with whatever new thing comes from Jump Fest. So like I'm looking forward to it only because it's Yu-Gi-Oh. But yeah, I don't think too much will change unless we get a really cool list, right? And then OCG seems like it's going to get a bunch of cool stuff before us, as is tradition.
yeah.
It's going to be unfortunate.
All right. So thank you guys for sticking with us. I guess hopefully there'll be a big jump announcement. We talk about that next week. So I guess we'll see you then.
I